Ladies and gents, welcome to the show number 4 with Vigeant Jr. And we are deep inside with the hammer holder from the World Armwrestling League, middleweight sensation of the US. Found a lot out about you, Rob, in these last few episodes. For those of you who haven't seen episodes 1, 2, or 3, I'll put the link in the description here to those episodes. Please go back, check them out when you've done that. Get your ass back on here and have a look at these. Rob, we were just talking about you being gifted. One of the things that you probably get annoyed with people saying so often is it thrown your way. But you did sort of acknowledge the fact that you have some gifts in the strength environment, without a doubt. When you look at the sport now in the middleweight division, particularly North America or outside of North America, mate, do you see many of those guys, or is there any of those guys, and we'll start with North America, that you particularly see as similar to you, unique, bit of a freak, bit of a one-off?
It's hard because, like I said, I have kind of a unique makeup and build. There are other guys that have like big hands, like so we'll say somebody that's got really good, big hands. Just a little something different about him, like Bill Sinks. Mike Solaris I always heard about, but for me, I think everybody has their own little uniquenesses, and it's hard to distinguish some of the people that are kind of where they are because they're just like a genetic weirdo, or people that have just put in a lot of work. And of course, too, be careful of the old drug rabbit hole, but I've also seen, depending on what people do, their skeletons change. So, I mean, I've seen hands get wider and wrists get thicker. And so you could tell that person, if you didn't know what they did or didn't know them before, you could look at them and say, wow, look at the size of that guy's wrists and elbows and everything. But you didn't realize that 40 pounds ago, there was nothing special. So it's kind of hard to dissect who the weirdos are. Like, so we could say somebody like Alan Fisher, but I don't only want to look at things like hand size. There's just, it's athleticism too. It's how they use it. It's the level of strength, So I don't know. Someone that I'm looking at, there's a lot of guys who are great at the sport, but I think everyone's got their own little uniquenesses or things that are different. I think I'm different in my ways. Is there anyone like me that's like shadowing me? I don't think so.
Did you find, or do you find that the guys that you were most impressed by in the sport of arm wrestling, and you can talk about some of those or any of those that you are inspired by or respect, do you find that those guys tend to be similar to you in terms of that they are very physical, complete arm wrestlers? Or is it more, and I hope I'm not sort of putting anything out on the table there that you won't sort of endorse, but you've often spoken privately to me that you've said, look, you once made a comment that I always loved, and I'd used it myself a few years ago in Arm Wars, where, my strength is not having a weakness. When you were on the Arm Wars show, I said one of my favourite Rob quotes ever. And then afterwards you said, I don't believe that, when we were having a drink at the bar. You said, if I've got a weakness, it's mental, not physical. I beat myself up, and you've spoken many times about the two wolves and this, that, and the other. Do you find that, therefore, the guys that you have most admiration for are strong physically, or is it mental? Do you respect more the mental strength or the mental agility within the sport? What do you identify with most or aspire to?
I'd say I identify with both because I've recognized the personal battles and the weaknesses I've had and what it's cost me. I used to say all the time, take me as I am, how my body naturally wants to move, how it works, whatever my strength capabilities are. Open my head up and put John Brzezink's brain in my head, and I'll perform at a whole different level. Take Enkin Terzi's brain and put it in my head. If you take out some of the mental blocks that I've put there for myself or for whatever reason over time, I'd be a much different person. So I admire somebody that I can see that rises to the occasion, that's a gamer. People who come out and they're just like 100% on, or at least they show to me. I don't know what's going on inside them, but they look like they're always game time 100%. Yeah, I admire those guys. But as an athlete that sees the physicality and knows what things are and performance speaks, you can't help but be taken aback by the guys who are, physically dominant. And it started for me with, John Brzezinski, Ron Batt, guys that just had a quality to them, and they looked like they could. You're not going to walk into a match with John Brzezinski around Bath and go, if I could just sink that hook. Like, even Engen Terzi, as amazing as he was, there was a legion of guys out there that are like, God damn, if I could just sink that hook. You can't do that with John or Ron. Like, they were just as comfortable and as proficient in that realm as they were with snapping your hand back.
Yeah.
No, people didn't walk up to a table with John Brzezinski and go, I'm going to throw him in the straps. I'm going to throw him in a hook. I'm going to top. They were just kind of like, what do we do? I always said to beat him, you've just got to be flat out better than him. And you can't help but admire somebody who's that good and that proficient physically. So, yeah, I can recognize mental strength. I can recognize physical strength. I think I have levels of respect on both fronts.
You know, one of the things that always fascinated me a great deal was tournament versus supermatch and who's more proficient in each area. And I would have loved to see a prime John in a very deep, very thick world-level tournament. And you could pick certain times where I would have loved to see that happen. The same with yourself, the same with Devon, because I think there are certain guys that adapt better to supermatch or are more suited to supermatch, and Devon's a great example of that. In my opinion, Devon is very, very suited to supermatch arm wrestling. Michael Todd is another great example of a guy that's very suited to supermatch arm wrestling. I know in my own career, I sort of thought about developing my style so it was more suited. In fact, the reason I moved into top rolling and using the explosive top roll more came over time, having taken losses in the areas where I felt more comfortable, which was the hook back in the day. It just didn't work. You'd get into long, drawn-out battles. You might be the strongest guy in the hook, but somebody was maybe 10% less, and you'd get in a bind with them. Then you'd have another one, and suddenly the guy who's 20% less, 3 rounds down, is giving you problems. And before you know it, you've got miles on your arm and some guy that you could have hammered if you'd met him in the early rounds that goes on to win the tournament.
Yeah, that's the tournament mantra, right? I always said, unless somebody's really head and shoulders over the class, that it can cause a lot of, false placings. When you say pretty much that example you just described, I believe is what happened to Joseph LeVay when he pulled him the wall. Because I believe for the class, when he was in 176, he probably had the strongest arm, and there'll be a lot of rebuttals on that. But for an arm, I think he probably had the strongest arm in that W.A.L class out in the Vegas finals. And then who'd he hit in the finals? Giannis, the other guy who's like a hammer.
In two examples of that, LeVay in the qualifier from the UK and Europe, he won France. Then he got through to the Europe qualifier, was on the A side at one side of the bracket, came through, met Tom Holland. Tom Holland beats him in one of the best matches you'll ever see, ever. Ridiculous, unbelievable battle. Ruined both guys. Wrecked Tom Holland's wrist. Bad. Really messed it up.
That's the other match that was in that tournament that changed the outcome. So LeVay and Giannis ruined each other.
Mm-hmm. Badly.
So you got LeVay losing to everybody.
Yeah.
I think Giannis did too. And then two of the favorites that I was watching, because only 4 weeks before that, in a big class at the regionals,
I know you're going to go with Randy Byers.
And
Tom Holland killed each other.
Yeah.
Killed each other.
And I mean, you're talking, those are like minute wars, deep bone to bone, fouls, restarts.
Yeah.
3-4 times? 5 minutes worth of dying arm wrestling. So I don't want to be the guy that takes away someone's hammer and whatnot, but to say that tournaments can't have outcomes, people only want to see the outcome as the outcome when it favors them.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, no, we're all the same tournament. We all had wars. But if you look at it a little bit objectively, and
there's wars and wars.
Things play out. Everyone like this, when they see two guys like that having wars, in the back of their mind is
yeah, great.
You know what I mean? They're like, call the next match quick. Call that guy up quick. Let's get him out of here. They don't want to see that after a match like that go to a 4-hour break. They don't want to see that. They want to see, let's keep running. Get these guys
out. And the flip thing is, once you've had that match and everything's been stretched beyond your elastic limit, It doesn't matter if it's 4 hours.
You're probably done for a month.
Yeah, you're
not coming back.
It's gone that hard, it's over. You know, it's completely over. But it's an interesting point you make there. But I would have loved to see the difference. I would have loved to see the peak of you where you would. What time do you believe was your peak, mate? Is your peak? Where have you? Is it there? Have we seen it yet?
I think chasing it. You know, it's funny because right now when I talk about not lifting weights, that's true and it's not, because I think I've got the perfect strength training program on accident, which means I just go down and lift 90 to 100% for like a set, and then I'll like not do anything for an hour, and then I'll go back down and do another set. They say in strength training you want to do long rest to let like your whole nervous system train, but I'll just go down there and I'll like, you know, point being, I know where I was in 2017. I had myself, I believed I was going to win the whole thing with Todd there and everything. Todd was the guy I was chasing because he beat me for the hammer 2 years before that.
Yep.
And I knew where I was when I had beat him, that 2016 when I had beat him like three times, I think. And I was better in 2017. And I have this big weight machine in my basement that's got a 200-pound stack on it. And I know with certain movements, with my roll and with my cup, with certain handles, what I could do and what was almost hard and impossible for me. And now casually, just through messing around with my machine today at quarantine, I can maneuver that machine, not in fake fool myself ways that I actually, to me, the way I pull them conducive to the sport. I can maneuver in ways that I've never been able to, even when I believe I was above everyone else. So I don't know where I am right now because I haven't even arm wrestled since September. You're talking Justin Bishop. You're talking, I'll be going on a year that I haven't pulled anybody. But if I had to dial in on a point, I think 2009 was a high point before I dipped off for a few years and got hurt. Because you're talking, that was a time when they had all the best super heavyweights. I was a 210-pound guy, and I just jumped into the super heavyweight class at ROTN. And, you know, I was in the Final Four with the likes of Ron Bath, John Brzezinski, and Travis Vigeant, and then me. And on that day, I got wins on Don Underwood, who went on to terrorize super heavyweights everywhere, all over. He turned out to be far better than we knew, and with just that month. I got a win on Dave Chafee and a whole boatload of other guys. I mean, that ROTN was basically what the U.A.L. and the W.A.L. is. I mean, everybody who was anybody that thought they could cash in unless they had a medical or, a life circumstance tried to be there. And, so yeah, I got my top four, and even John, I was always able to neutralize and dominate through the hand, and he was beating me in the straps. But, at that point in time, body strong and together, I wasn't polished, but I was pretty high, and I feel like I'm creeping on that line. I feel like I'm there now. Maybe better than ever. I don't know. Cause I'm doing weird things. I don't have a YouTube channel. I don't post much. I'll post things just to kind of like, so people don't think I'm full of, horse hockey and spitting nonsense out there. But I could do some weird things I've never done now.
It's interesting. You talk about obviously, access to training or training efficiency. A lot of people have spoken to me, even on the strongman side of things, about if I knew now, or if I knew then what I know now, I could do all this, I could make these efficient gains. What about if you could, Rob? What about, let's say, for example, like Ryan Bowen has been trained by Todd, and he's religiously followed this Todd Hutchins program. Is that something that you envy? Would you like an opportunity to have that kind of access to mental insight on where you might make gains?
That's a slippery slope, I think. I think the first thing that new guys do is they get in and say, they find someone successful and this is how you do it. I always just use the analogy. I said, if Muhammad Ali had trained Mike Tyson how to box, or Mike Tyson had trained Muhammad Ali how to box, neither one of them would have been world champions. Neither one of them would have been anything, because they're going against what their natural lane is, what they're naturally good at. Mm-hmm. And they'd be ignoring their physicality and how they should be playing the game. And that's kind of where I got sidetracked in the beginning. I trained with people who were successful in a lane, so they just coined that as, well, this is now how you arm wrestle.
Yep.
The idea of, crunching people and holding them down is something they didn't have necessarily the strength or the lane to do that. So that was almost like, no, you don't do that, because then if you do that, you risk your hand. but they're not thinking of it. What if somebody has a strong enough hand to just contain everybody? And what if a guy is strong enough to just curl everyone in like Rustum and just smash them? You know, Rustum can't go out there and train the guys like, who's that big long top roller that's beating Zola now?
Totiev.
So Rustum can't train a guy like Totiev because, I mean, if you train that guy to be just a hooker, maybe he's got the strength and the ability to be pretty good, but he wouldn't be what he is now. And the same thing is Vitaly Oletin can't get a hold of a guy like Rustum because they got such different makeup. So you can't just find a guy that's successful. Do I wish I had been roommates with John Brzezinski is the real question? Yeah. He's the guy that I think would understand how to make the most out of someone's strengths in a fundamental way of arm wrestling. That is what I seek out. I don't seek out I'm not a big fan of the loopholes and how to cheat somebody off the starts and get the better of them. And, you know, there's facets I appreciate, but for fundamental, good, solid, using your body to the best of its capabilities, Engin, John, yeah, they would definitely have made me better. I'm sure there's other guys out there, even when I see Igor when he used to do all those instructional videos of, you know, with Taras, Ivankin and all those guys, I feel like he really understood the game, and those guys over there really broke it down into pieces. Yeah, I mean, if I had been transplanted into Russia or someplace like that, yeah, I think it would make a big difference for me. It would have, yeah.
Could you see, let's say you had an example, an opportunity to build yourself, and you could give somebody an example of what you wanted to work. Could you write your own wish list of areas you'd want to improve? Do you have in your head that mapped out? Have you got an awareness of it, a visibility of it? Is it very clear to you?
Yeah. For me, the mental game is a struggle. It wasn't always there. I wasn't always a head case. I think that came through time with my own failures, and I let that mount up on me. So the mental game for me would need to be stronger. I'd say straps are always uncomfortable for me, but again, that comes through repetition and training. You could take the most gifted baseball pitcher or a quarterback in the world, and they still take them, and through repetition, they hone them. They have them throw 1,000 balls a day.
Yep.
When you train in an environment that people don't want to get tied to, now that's foreign territory. And even though I've been successful in the straps, I'm not a polished strap puller. I'm just better. And through lack of being, you know, too vulnerable or being really strong, I'm able to negate guys who are probably better than me at playing the game. So I'd like to be better there. I'd like to be better. You know, for me, I had a shoulder injury. So just as the shoulder gets tighter, I'm able to kind of commit a little more, and I'm feeling a lot more powerful instead of having to back away. So I'm always, because I'm aware of that injury, I'm always pursuing, like, overcompensating for it. Now I just don't want to have a solid shoulder. I want to have, like, a ridiculous, like robotic shoulder. But I think I'd probably try to keep everything pretty equal. In my mind, I don't feel a glaring weakness. So it's just more or less, I want to get to a world that's just like ridiculous, overbearing strength, like Silverback, just like that's my goals are unrealistic. Like, you know, it's the old thing. If you shoot for the stars and land on the moon, it's still a pretty high space to be on.
Mm-hmm. So, when you think about guys like Ryan that have done this, they've invested in a certain area, and they thought, you know what, Ryan Bowen said, I was getting beaten by Jordan Davis, who's a long-rangey top roller, and so I figured I had to work an area, which for me, the best guy that I could see who was doing that was Todd Hutchins. Do you feel that can be really problematic ultimately for people because it changes them, it moves them away from where they're strong?
Yeah, I don't think just because someone beats you in your lane or your move means you're doing it wrong. Mm-hmm. You could have a lane or move it's like everything. It's like a comedian. You and I have had talks about this, how you're not going to appease 100% of people. You know, you can get a comedian, if he goes into a room and gets 75% of people to laugh and 25% of people are like, that's lame. He's got 75% approval rate. He's doing pretty good. You know, his jokes are coming off good. There's more laughs than boos, so he's doing good. And I think in any sport, even in the world of, I like to compare arm wrestling a lot to mixed martial arts.
Yep.
Because it is a way of, it's body manipulation. You're dealing with a person. You're not dealing with a weight on how to move it. And a guy might be able to go in there and wrestle 99 of his opponents to the ground. But there might be a guy that it makes him rethink what he's going to do, because that guy might have just as good of a wrestling game, but he can't beat him standing up. So you're not going to sit there and still bull charge through and maybe lose the wrestling match. You've got to rethink your game. But that doesn't mean because you won the boxing match against that one guy, you now stop wrestling and you revert to being a boxer full time and forget wrestling.
Yeah.
But there's those times you get one person, like I said, James Smith. I rethought my game for guys like James Smith to get to the next level. But my post was aces. I was winning 99% of my matches. I have it in my back pocket, and with my strength, I've developed otherwise. But yeah, I don't think you should totally get away, because no, if something starts not working for you overall, yeah, revamp, rip it up and start over. But with one person, maybe dial in on that person. But you're never going to find one technique that works with everybody. That's something I do know. There are guys, you see Jumpers Inc., grab people like this, ready, go. But there are guys like Travis, or, you know, even when I would pull him, I could just give his hand enough trouble where he'd have to, you know, abandon ship and get out there. But you would see him still pull some of the top heavies, and, you know, but 99% of guys, he didn't abandon that. He just knew with certain guys, he had to take a different route.
Yeah.
There is an end result. The end result is win. I mean, how you do it, you know, you got to be smart with it. It's a thinking person's game. Arm wrestling's not as much of a meathead game as people think it is.
No, by no means. Yeah, it's much more mental than physical in some respects. I think all combat sports are, mate. You know, the guys who I've often seen that are really excellent at it are usually thinking steps in front.
Well, you see a lot of your guys that are top level in the sport. If you sit down and talk to them, and I've never talked to a guy even like Dennis Plankov, it's easy to look at him and think he's not a smart guy. And I've heard he's actually a very intelligent guy. And a lot of the guys that you see at the top of the sport usually have a very good understanding of the human body, angles, things like physics, and unique ways of training. And they're very intelligent and creative. So, I mean, your guys that are at the top of the sport are generally anything but a lunk. And that's the thing I think that would surprise the masses, is that it's filled with intelligent people. And to be at the top of the game, you can't just be a strong guy. You got to have strength, athleticism, intelligence. It's a weird mixture that goes even beyond physicality.
So, obviously, let's get back to the sort of my strength is not having a weakness thing. If you had your top tier, what is your biggest strength, do you believe? Where do you think you ace? If you had to pick, I mean, if somebody asked me, you know, if you say, okay, where do you think your real benefits were as an arm wrestler? I would have said my understanding of the sport was one. That was definitely where I think I was above a lot of people. And he had, in terms of genetically, where you feel like you were genetically gifted for it, it would be wrist and explosivity. Those two things, you know, which I've known about well before arm wrestling. But I think everybody's got certain things that they are predisposed to do very well. And you usually know what those are. If you have to sort of, again, circle your absolute ace, what do you believe it is, mate?
I think when people talk about me, the thing that goes hand in hand, no pun intended, is, you know, my hand and wrist is pretty well known. I think even people have credited the majority of my success to my hand and wrist, even to the point where it used to bother me so bad with them thinking I didn't have any other body strength or arm, that I used to sacrifice even using it just so I could protect my ego and show people that I could beat them in other areas. But I've been so hand and wrist dominant, even at the super heavyweight level. You know, I can't even recall a time ever having my hand folded back, even with pulling guys like, Travis. You know, it just hasn't happened. So I think with that, it creates a fear with people where they don't know how to pull you. You know, do they run away? Do they slip? Do they go to straps? Are they going to be able to slip? Because back in the day, when you had to earn the strap, even if you're intentionally slipping, I used to get my hand, you know, chalk white, and clamp people and reclamp. And when I got a bite on them, I would just kind of like shoulder press them sideways. So slipping wasn't even easy. It almost never happened. So I think for me, you know, with the different strengths I have, I think the thing that strikes a lot of fear into people is the hand and wrist dominance.
Yeah, you've certainly utilised that to your benefit in this last couple of years, and you've changed your game a lot in this last couple of years. It's fair to say, where you've spoken about as in the past you'd had issues protecting your hand and wrist, particularly when you're in a strap. I think often that had been because you felt so physically dominant that you'd often allow people, and I think even in your most recent match with Justin, I know there was a lot of mental going on there as well, a lot of mental going on there as well, and Justin's a great top roller, got a great hand and wrist himself. But I do think you're sometimes guilty of holding the guy. So, sort of like, you compared it with mixed martial arts, it's almost like you had two stand-up fighters and one of the guys leaves his chin hanging there because he feels like he can't be knocked out. So he sort of has to feel that one acid shot, maybe get a bit of a wobble in his knees before he thinks, you know what, I better fight back and forget that. You always try and hang on to the dude. I've seen a lot of guys be able to initiate on you over the years.
Yeah.
Is that something you've been conscious of? Do you feel like that? Do you feel like you're sort of trying to dominate guys in matches, or have done?
It comes from a mental side. Sometimes I just need to see where I can be with a person before I can actually feel comfortable with imposing myself on them. So my comfort zone with doing that is kind of just sit up there, be rigid, and brace for the storm. And then once I feel it, then I say, like, I can get a little, like I'm like preheating. I warm up. It's not because it's the smartest strategy. There's a lot of insecurities in my own game. There's a lot of insecurities in myself. I get up there and, when I got injured and it bit me for the better part of like 6 years, and I saw myself not able to do things that used to be very easy to me. And the comeback trail created a lot of insecurity. I was at a point in time when I think I was a little more, I was starting to get a decent offensive game, and then I kind of got hurt. And then I got to a point where it was like I was trying to survive. I was just trying to get by. And again, through repetition, you throw 1,000 balls at a hoop or, run a route 1,000 times. My repetition was just kind of, stand tall and absorb. And I'm not saying it's the best battle strategy. That is on the to-do list. Because once I can get my whole body tight and I'm confident and it's trained up here, then you're going to see that next notch of me, that next level of me, which is coming in this next season. I feel I'm getting there where I can feel like when you hear Angan Terzi preach his, everything's solid and you just kind of move with it. I feel that cement throughout my body that is developed. I haven't been able to apply it because when my mental's porked, I just get up there and go, okay, let them go, and I just let people rip. And that's happened, and I've made it out of those scraps alive, but by no means is it the most efficient way of doing things.
I mean, a great example of that, if anybody wanted to see exactly what I'm talking about, would be the Arm Wars high stakes match against Marcio Barboza, when it's fair to say neither of you were in the best shape you've ever been in. But I think that probably there was a bit of parity in that respect from speaking to you both before, during and after. But what I would say is if you want to see sort of that evolution of you waking up in a match, I think the evidence is right there. You start the match sort of like, okay, here I am, you go, and you pay the price for it. And then it's like, okay, yeah, it felt pretty bad. The next round I'll give a little bit more, attack a little differently, do so. And as the rounds go by, you sort of, your style, your approach to the match evolves and opens up. And so at the end of the match, it's a very, very different match and a very different set of propositions that are in front of Marcio.
Yeah.
And that's and why that's so effective is Marcio's so well rounded.
Yeah, Marcio is a guy that was actually the match that hurt me. After that, I went from, my shoulder wasn't right for 6 years. I've had people tell me about pulling Todd Hutchings because, he just blasted sideways to me. I'm like, of course. I had no sideways. My shoulder was torn. I'm a blue-collar kid who works under the table. I don't have insurance. And people are like, oh, why did you get surgery? I can't get surgery. I never had insurance in my life. I'm an under-the-table, bozo who I had to do everything with my left hand for 6 months after that. You know, when you called me up for that match, I hadn't arm wrestled in years, and I told Heather, I was like, oh, this guy Neil, he wants me to go out to Vegas and arm wrestle, and that's when she's kind of like, so this thing's pretty legit what you do. I was like, she didn't know anything about me. I said, yeah. I says, you know, it's my thing. It's my gig. So I went out there, and I literally pulled that match off the couch. But what happens when you try to take your body back to doing something it's not used to doing, and then put me up against one of the best super heavyweights ever? I got hurt, and it hurt me for a long time. And I wasn't the same after that match, which is why you take losses after that, and everyone chalks you up as a bum. It's like, that's the same person Marcio pulled, and it's not the same person from 2010 when I was training. I'm a hurt version. So, yeah, the evolution, a guy like Marcio is so joggy, and he hooks, he shoulder rolls, he top rolls, he hits, he straps. You know, you're not going to find a hole anywhere. And I think the biggest win for me in that game was I walked into that match. That was one of those matches that everyone said I didn't even belong on a table with him. He's a guy who has wins on every good puller, including, I think, even Andre Pushkar at some point in time. Mm-hmm. And people are like, this 200-pound bozo, you know, would you even put that match together? So for me, just being able to make the dude sweat, you know, I think he even hurt himself in that match. I think he had to go off to the hospital after that match. He screwed up his elbow. Again, not the best shapes of our career, but there was nobody else at 200 pounds who could put the brakes on Marcio that day anyways.
I was really pleased about that match because I got a lot of people saying, particularly in the US, when I got over there, saying, Marcio and Rob? Not sure about that. That might be a real one-sided affair. And when it was done and it turned into the absolute screamer that it was, I thought, yeah, job done. A little nod to myself that night while I had a beer. You know, I thought it came off just as in my mind. That's how I saw it play out. Honestly, yeah. So I saw it play out. So I think I even told you beforehand what was going to happen. So I was really confident it's going to be a war.
It'd be great to run it now, you know, where I'm assuming Marcio's in better shape and, you know, I'm able to be a little more, table invested. And I've realized for me being on a table, your body gets conditioned with the different torques and you can't really emulate those torques, but the torque that your body's going to feel with a guy like Marcio who's hitting sideways and down, you can't really emulate that in the gym. So I feel like my body's more conditioned for that. It'd be a cool match to run again. You know, and Marcio, since that match, has become one of the guys that I call, you know, a friend within the sport. And I don't throw that around to everybody. And he's just a great, genuine guy. And
he really is
pretty cool after that. You know, from that point on, we've always been, you know, we'll reach out to each other randomly, holidays and stuff like that. So he's a great dude. But he jacked me up for 6 years. And, for 6 years.
Took away 6 years of my career. And,
career, work, everything hurt. Sleeping hurt, everything hurt.
Ladies and gents, that brings us to the end of this episode 4 of Deep Inside with Rob Vigeant Jr. Listen, guys, send us in some questions before we do the next ones if you want us to get them across to Rob, and we'll try and fit them in there. We're going to move on in episode 5 to some of Rob's matches and also opinions around opponents, potential opponents. What's next as well? We'll do some of the history stuff and where Rob's been and some of his biggest matches, biggest threats, biggest opponents. And we'll also talk about, as we go into the next couple of episodes, who we'd like to face, who are the potential matches out there. So please send us in those questions. Remember, if you didn't see the first 3 episodes, check them out. Links are in the description. If you like what we do, hit that subscribe button, like, and share this thing. Let people know about it. Until that time, guys, take it easy. Thanks for your time, Rob Vigeant, and we will see you again, brother.
Thanks for having me, buddy.